Do you know there are legal immigrants afraid of being deported? That's legal immigrants. A 1996 federal immigration law facilitated deportations by expanding the categories of crimes that are deportable offenses. Today we have Samson Coyonda, a lawyer and immigration expert, ex-state district attorney and immigration lawyer Michael Musa Obregon, and Dennis Sanders, a former Queens assistant district attorney and currently an administrative law judge for the city of New York. It's a pleasure having you all on the program, gentlemen.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure being
We're going to
here.
have fun today talking about immigration.
Oh, yeah.
This is one of my favorite subjects. But let me tell you about the student, one of my students, who proposed this idea to me. She said, "Professor, there are legal immigrants getting deported." And I said, no, you're talking about illegal immigrants. And she said, no, a lot more legal immigrants are now being affected because of this law in 1996 that basically expanded the definition of what is a crime in this country. Can anybody explain to me, who would like to start, Mr. Ogon? Tell me about that law in 1996.
Sure. When that law was passed, everything changed for immigrants in the United States. People that for generations had lived here without a problem, that may have committed a crime in their earlier youth, are now subject to deportation. It affects tens of thousands of people in cities across the country. And sometimes you can have someone who's lived a very, very good life in the United States, but for something that occurred 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, one day, boom, they be picked up by immigration, they can see a judge, they can be deported.
What kind of crimes are we talking about? Misdemeanors?
Well, misdemeanor for criminal law would not be misdemeanor for immigration law, because immigration law is a federally regulated body of law.
Okay.
Now, what we pass as a misdemeanor in a county or a state law would not necessarily be a misdemeanor in the federal law. Now, to the question of why are more legal immigrants facing deportation today, I think this has to do with the fact that prior to 96, it was possible for you to take a guilty plea with the expectation that it will have no serious consequence. I mean, deportation on your status.
So you took
Now,
a guilty plea,
in
and now it's
anticipation
affecting.
right, you took a guilty plea in anticipation that, well, immigration law will not catch up with me, because prior to 96, such persons were eligible for certain statutory reliefs or defenses, as you call them in criminal proceedings. Now, in 96, following the passage of this law, such persons' rights were severely curtailed. Now, people who would otherwise be fine, people who pled guilty to what we pass as a simple offense criminal-wise in state laws, and when I mean simple, I don't in any way diminish the magnitude of the crime, but people who did no jail time, who took a guilty plea, the DA with all the apparatus of criminal prosecution looks at this person and says, you don't need to go to jail.
But how small a crime are we talking about? I mean, somebody who jumped the turnstile in a subway?
Yes.
The
answer is yes.
That could get him deported?
Yeah, jumping the turnstile would be considered a crime involving moral turpitude.
Moral turpitude.
And
Explain that to me, Judge.
Exactly. I mean, that's the thing that we have to understand. Moral turpitude is very important here. When you look at moral turpitude, you have to ask yourself, there's 4 different branches. Crimes against the person, crimes against property, sex crimes and family crimes, and crimes against the government. For example, if you ask yourself, what is moral turpitude when it comes crimes against the person? Well, crimes against the person, it must have criminal intent and reckless. For example, something involving violence or involving serious dangerous weapon, that's moral turpitude. However, you have to remember, simple assault, assault 3 here in New York would not be considered moral turpitude, but assault 1 or attempted murder would be considered moral turpitude. Then you have crimes against property, theft, forgery, robbery, moral turpitude, okay? But possession of burglar tools, that's not moral turpitude, all right? Then you have sex crimes and crimes against the family, rape, moral turpitude, definitely. But what people don't realize, spousal abuse, child abuse is also moral turpitude, okay?
All of that will get you deported.
Yes, okay? Then you have crimes against the government. Crimes, for instance,
welfare fraud.
Welfare fraud, bribing a government official, those are crimes of moral turpitude that people don't realize that might get them deported.
Now, before 1996, most of these crimes would not affect an immigrant?
No, before 1996, you take the guilty plea, you would not be deported. Now, after 1996, such persons' eligibility for relief became seriously restricted. Now, it becomes only available to a very limited number of persons. And again, in 1996, certain level of the crimes were reduced. For instance, for you to be subject to deportation for a crime of fraud that involves an amount of before 96 it was $20,000. Now the fraud amount after 96 became $10,000. If you defraud the government or you're involved in some kind of financial fraud to which the loss attributable to the victim was over $10,000 or less, you become subject to deportation. Prior to 96, it had to be $20,000 cap.
So tell me give me some anecdotes about your clients. You guys are lawyers, you defend a lot of these people who come to you thinking, look, I just had this minor little thing in my record way back, and you go, whoa, you got a problem, right?
Yes.
What is their reaction when you tell them that?
Well, I remember vividly a case I did for this gentleman from Ecuador. He came here as a kid, and he grew up in the Bronx. And I probably was at the wrong place at the wrong time. He was caught with possession of drugs. Now, he did his, I think he never did any time. He pled guilty, he did community service, probation, less than 1 year. He was fine. He lived here all his life because back in '89 when he committed the crime, he was like in his 20s. He went to school, he became a technician.
And he was here legally?
Yes, legally. His parents brought him here as a kid. So he became a technician, very successful technician. And a preacher. So he went overseas to preach. On his way back, following the reforms after 9/11, coming back to the country at any time, whether you're a permanent resident or not, you're subject to checks, background checks. And then his old conviction came up. And I told the gentleman that you should never have traveled. You should have consulted with your attorney before
I
you
understand that this is how a lot of people are finding out that they have a problem when they travel abroad and they try to come back into the country.
Exactly.
That's right. At that point, at the airport, the immigration officer grabs their passport, takes away their green card, gives them an appointment for something called deferred inspection. They have to show up at 26 Federal Plaza, and they are being studied or investigated for the purposes of deportation. The officer may not know whether that person must be deported because they don't have an actual record of a criminal conviction, but they're told to come back 2 or 3 months later. People think that it's not a big deal. They think it's just a regular appointment at immigration. When they go there, they're asked to bring the certificate of dispositions. When they bring them, boom, they issue a notice to appear, which is the beginning of a deportation case.
Well, when we come back, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, I want to talk about what this all means in terms of comprehensive immigration reform. We've elected a new president. He has all kinds of plans to deal with illegal immigration in this country. Let's consider that when we come back. What's going to happen in this country with illegal immigration, with legal immigration? Are we going to be more compassionate in the future?
We hope so.
We'll be right back.